Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and there's always been one shot in the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer footage that has eluded my grasp, and that is this moment from the Like a Prayer trailer, when Wolverine, in the simplest suburban daddy outfit we ever see him in, at least in any of this footage, strolls past this tidy but foreboding row of columns in a foggy wheat field. The trailer clips that surround it suggest that Wolverine in this movie failed his universe or let his world go to shit, as Deadpool says, so the assumption is that all of these columns might be the gravestones memorializing the fallen X-Men of Wolverine's home reality, like we're reminded somewhat of the memorial to the Snap victims in San Francisco's Crissy Field in Avengers Endgame. But I think we are all getting this shot wrong. I don't think Logan is falling to his knees in a state of mourning, but rather in a more profound sense of awe at his place in the universe. And in the light of new teases from this movie's director Shawn Levy and Marvel head Kevin Feige in a recent article in Empire magazine, in this video I am going to explain how these gravestones are not marking dead X-Men, but rather representing dead Wolverines. And the best way to support New Rockstars is to grab one of our many X-Men inspired designs over at nerdright.shop, like our latest one celebrating the end of X-Men 97, Magneto Was Right. So the recent article in Empire magazine by writer Chris Hewitt includes a number of interesting scoops that somehow flew under everyone's radar, specifically a few quotes by Kevin Feige, which are always most revealing because while the actors are often terrified of saying the wrong thing and accidentally spoiling Marvel's big plans, which both Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman seem to be in this particular article, Kevin Feige, as the studio head, ain't afraid of anyone, especially now that he's apparently sniping scoopers. Like, can we get some toast? The toast is toast! And in this article, among Feige's quotes are a confirmation that the film's references to the 2017 Logan film are, quote, very reverential. Reverential meaning like with reverence, like the type of reverence one would pay by falling to their knees in awe. Feige also confirmed B, a plot tease that Mr. Paradox shows Deadpool, quote, the most glorious place in the world, aka the sacred timeline, the one true timeline in the multiverse, the home of the MCU, which leaves Deadpool intrigued enough to take Paradox's offer without fully appreciating the, quote, universe-sized stakes of it. And C, a confirmation that this Wolverine is not the same Wolverine from any X-Men film that we have seen so far. Meanwhile, director Shawn Levy is quoted as saying, it's like an Easter egg farm, this movie. And it's at the end of a paragraph listing confirmed and speculated cameos, which normally, at least according to my American journalism education, means that the preceding sentences of that paragraph are implied paraphrases, summaries based on the interview, or at least background in that interview that must be rooted in the discussion in your interview with the source. Like, nothing you ever write in any piece of journalism should just be like you speculating your own kind of creative thinking in it. Everything should be somehow tangentially related to interviews or other research that you do from other sources. It's not supposed to be you opining. It's not an opinion piece. And Levy's direct quote at the end of that paragraph is structured to be the exact words he said when the interviewer was asking about these other possible cameos. So the fact that this article includes a mention of Dougray Scott might be the smoking gun here, because Dougray Scott has not really come up a whole lot. It's kind of been a name erased from history, at least in the modern age. When it comes to Dougray Scott's connection to the X-Men franchise, he's kind of been relegated to a footnote, unfortunately, and the fact that he comes up at all tells us that he might be part of the plan now. Dougray Scott was originally cast as Wolverine for the 2000 X-Men film when it was being developed in the late 90s, but Dougray Scott was shooting Mission Impossible 2 in Australia, and according to this actor, production for Mission Impossible 2 was running long, and Tom Cruise refused to release Dougray Scott to begin production on X-Men. So that, plus a motorcycle accident, caused Dougray Scott to have to completely back out of the X-Men production. Now, Russell Crowe was reportedly Bryan Singer's first choice to play the part of Wolverine, but he had turned it down. Instead, he had recommended his friend Hugh Jackman. So Hugh Jackman stayed kind of in their list of possible names as a backup to Dougray Scott, because Hugh Jackman at the time was just kind of a lesser known theater actor. But when Dougray Scott had to back out, Hugh Jackman got the call. And then history just played out as we know it. Now, while Dougray Scott has had a successful career in his own right, you just have to imagine how big the role of Wolverine was for Hugh Jackman. Dougray Scott must have always imagined, what if? So by Shawn Levy calling something an Easter egg farm, eggs are not grown on crops, my friend. They're laid by chickens or by like Easter rabbits. that like lay eggs. I mean, the Cadbury commercials are very confusing, but I think him choosing the word farm is telling by what we're actually looking at on this wheat field. And the fact that Russell Crowe is also part of this origin story for the casting of Wolverine is why I think this particular setting is showing a surreal landscape containing the graves of not past X-Men, but all possible theoretical Wolverines. And thinking of Russell Crowe as part of it, I previously compared this wheat field to Ridley Scott's footage in Gladiator whenever the warrior Maximus imagined his home in Spain, a homecoming shown at the end of that film as Maximus ventured into his afterlife and his fingertips grazed the tops of those wheat stalks. An image so iconic that the Russos totally borrowed it for the shot of Thanos in Avengers Endgame when he was harvesting crops on his farm in the garden, which was, at least practically, meant to be Thanos' spiritual afterlife. It's where he retired when he thought he was done with his life. When I've got time for a game night, I want to spend that time playing games, not sitting through setup or explanation. That's why my new go-to, oh man, we gotta play this game, is Doomlings! Doomlings is a card game for 2 to 6 players, ages 10 and up, that takes 5 minutes to learn. All the rules are on the cards themselves, so it's super easy to pick up and play. You're just trying to score the most points before the end of the world by playing cards from your hand called traits, which have these super fun, whimsical characters on each one that just remind me of Pokemon. Every round is called an age, and every age introduces new rules that keep the gameplay fresh. Occasionally, an age will introduce a catastrophe, and the game ends when the third catastrophe strikes. There, now you know how to play Doomlings. Literally, it's that simple to explain. The classic game has everything you need to play, and there's also a deluxe edition, which has the base game plus 5 expansions with advanced mechanics, a playmat, and 3 mystery holo foils. Ooh. You can get Doomlings in retail stores like Walmart or Target, but if you scan the QR code or click the link in the description and use code Rockstars20, you'll get 20% off your order at doomlings.com. So this location is probably not anywhere in physical, practical space. It's a realm, it's a state of mind. That thick fog is like a surreal wall and a backdrop. It's not the wasteland that Deadpool and Wolverine occupy for the rest of the footage. This row of columns is not even a finite row of graves. It clearly goes on and on to infinity. These columns are meant to be endless. Sure, there are a lot of X-Men, even a lot of mutants, but there are a finite number of them, or at least a finite number that Wolverine would care about. But in the multiverse, there are infinite Wolverines. So I think this location is some kind of ethereal plane akin to the Aru, the field of reeds on the other side of the Duat, the afterlife depicted in Moon Knight, which the goddess Tawaret confirmed as being part of the same spiritual network as the Wakandan ancestral plane. And in the mythology of Ridley Scott's Gladiator starring Russell Crowe, which is getting a sequel this year by the way, also the kind of afterlife that Maximus goes to when he dies. This is a specific afterlife plane where Wolverines find their resting place. When Logan died in Logan, in the script, Hugh Jackman was directed to convey, according to the exposition, quote, a flicker of wonder. And I think that's what that Logan saw. He saw this field of reeds. It implied that when Wolverines die, they see something. They go somewhere. And this is that. So I theorize that each of these stones represents a different Wolverine. One for Hugh Jackman, hell, maybe a few different Hugh Jackman Wolverines. Also one for Dougray Scott Wolverine, one for Russell Crowe Wolverine, one for Daniel Radcliffe Wolverine, one for Taron Edgerton Wolverine, because one of the two of them is probably playing that patch Wolverine that we see in the casino. And hell, maybe even one for Dodd Wolverine, the voice actor from the X-Men animated series, and maybe even for a Wolverine played by Ryan Reynolds in this movie. In this shot, Wolverine isn't collapsing to his knees out of grief for fallen X-Men, because we already saw a Wolverine go through that process in the 2017 Logan. And based off of what Kevin Feige said in this article, I don't think they're gonna retread on that path too much. So instead, I think this Wolverine is in awe upon his realization that he is just one of an infinite number of Wolverines. So when Deadpool responds to Mr. Paradox's mission by saying that he's, quote, Marvel Jesus, I think he really means that he's been tasked with finding the one Wolverine who represents a paradox to this equation, the one in the wasteland in the yellow and the blue suit who refuses to die and to move on. And by fixing that glitch, Deadpool will be able to liberate all of these Wolverines so that they can have their souls cleared and move on. Kind of like in the way in the Christian belief, Jesus died for our sin so that the souls trapped in the limbo state could pass on to heaven. So just to recap, in the MCU, the afterlives we've seen include the ancestral plane, the Duat, the Aru, Valhalla, the soul realm that Thanos and Tony Stark saw when they snapped the stones, and then the glowing white limbo space that Rocket entered in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And now, adding to the list, this wheat field, whatever it actually is. I think they're all connected in the same spiritual network. They follow the same rules and they serve the same narrative purpose for the characters. A kind of limbo state that you venture to when you're on the cusp of death, but not a permanent resting place. A kind of ethereal construction that tells the hero that there's still work to do. Comment down below with your thoughts on all this. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.